They said her name like it was a joke. Then the doors slammed open and the room went silent because of him. Amara Adeyemi stood frozen at the center of her family's ballroom, her glass of wine trembling in her hand, as the man she'd hired for one night walked toward her like he owned the building, and everyone in it. His eyes were locked on hers. Not a flicker. Not a hesitation. He crossed that room like the sea of relatives mocking her didn't exist. And when he reached her, he didn't say a word. He just cupped her face in his hands, tilted her chin up, and kissed her in front of everyone who had spent the last hour laughing at her for being alone. Somebody dropped a glass. Somebody gasped. Her mother's mouth fell open. But Amara wasn't thinking about any of them anymore. Because the man kissing her wasn't supposed to feel like this. This wasn't in the arrangement. And 3 feet away, hidden behind a phone camera, a stranger from a rival family was already sending that photo to people who would make sure both of them regretted this night for the rest of their lives. Afro meets Soul Stories. On today's episode, you'd get a dose of betrayal, power, romance, love, unexpected encounters, and beautiful beginnings. If this is your first time here, make sure to like, subscribe, click the notification icon to get a reminder when new amazing stories drop, and send this story to friends and family who you think would love to watch it. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd really love to know. Now let's dive back into this amazing story. 3 days before that kiss, Amara didn't know Seojun Kang existed. She was 28, sharp and successful. A graphic designer with her own small studio in the heart of Lagos. The kind of woman who built things with her own 2 hands and never had to ask anyone for permission. But none of that mattered to her family. Not the studio, not the client list, not the independence she'd fought so hard for. All that mattered to them was one thing. She was still single. And in her family, being single at 28 wasn't a phase. It was a failure. Her mother called her on a Tuesday evening, and Amara knew before she even picked up what the conversation would be about. The reunion is this weekend, her mother said, her voice already tight with warning. Everyone is bringing someone. Your cousin Bimp is bringing her fiancé. Even your Auntie Florence's daughter, the one who never leaves her house, found a man. Mummy, please. I'm not asking you to marry a stranger, Amara. I'm asking you to stop embarrassing this family. Bring someone. Anyone. Or don't bother coming at all. The line went dead before Amara could respond. She sat there for a long moment, staring at her phone, feeling something crack quietly inside her chest. Not sadness exactly, but a tired kind of anger. 3 years of this. 3 years since her last relationship ended in public humiliation, when her ex left her standing at his own sister's wedding to go home with another woman. 3 years of aunties whispering, cousins pitying, her mother sighing like Amara's whole existence was a disappointment she had to explain to the neighbors. She wasn't going to beg anyone to love her. But she also wasn't ready to lose her family over her pride. So on Thursday night, against every instinct she had, Amara found herself at the Aurelian, a private lounge downtown that her friend Chidinma had once described as, where Lagos's most dangerous money hides in plain sight. She wasn't there to drink. She was there because she'd made a decision that scared her a little. She was going to find someone, pay them, and end this conversation with her family once and for all. She didn't expect to find him within 20 minutes. He was sitting alone in a corner booth, a glass of untouched whiskey in front of him, wearing a black suit that looked like it cost more than her studio's monthly rent. He wasn't loud. He wasn't performing for anyone. He simply existed in that space with a stillness that made everyone around him seem restless in comparison. Amara noticed him the way you notice a fire in a dark room. Not because you're looking for it, but because it's impossible to ignore once you've seen it. She told herself it was reckless. She walked toward him anyway. "Is this seat taken?" she asked. He looked up and for a second something flickered behind his dark eyes. Surprise maybe, or amusement. He had the kind of face that didn't belong to ordinary men. Sharp jaw, quiet intensity, the kind of calm that felt almost dangerous, like he was used to people being afraid of him and had simply stopped noticing. "It is now," he said, his accent smooth, unhurried. "Sit." She sat. Her heart was pounding harder than she wanted to admit. "I have a strange proposal," she said, deciding bluntness was better than nerves. "I need a boyfriend. For one night. My family thinks I'm pathetic for being single and I'm tired of hearing about it. I'll pay you. Nothing complicated. One reunion, a few hours, and you never have to see me again." He studied her for a long moment, swirling the whiskey in his glass, saying nothing. The silence stretched long enough that she almost stood up and walked away out of embarrassment. Then he smiled, slow, unreadable, dangerous in a way she couldn't name yet. "You don't know who you're asking," he said quietly. "I don't need to know," Amara said. "I just need you to show up and pretend to like me for one evening." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers, and something in his expression shifted, like a man who had just been handed something far more interesting than he'd expected that night. "Pretending," he said, "won't be the hard part." She didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. She had no idea that the man sitting across from her wasn't just wealthy. He was Seojun Kang, heir to one of the most feared criminal networks stretching across 2 continents, a man currently hiding in Lagos while a war brewed behind him that could get them both killed. She didn't know that agreeing to this arrangement would pull her into a world of danger she couldn't have imagined. All she knew was that her heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with her family, and everything to do with the way he was looking at her, like she was the only person in the room. "So," she said, trying to steady her voice, "is that a yes?" He picked up his glass, finally taking a sip, his eyes still locked on hers over the rim. "Saturday," he said. "Text me the address." "And Amara." She blinked. "I didn't tell you my name." His smile deepened, slow and knowing. "No," he said. "You didn't." Amara didn't sleep much on Friday night. She kept replaying the way he said her name, a name she never gave him, turning it over in her mind like a puzzle piece that didn't fit anywhere. Who was he? How did he know? She almost canceled the whole arrangement 3 times. But every time she picked up her phone to text him and back out, she pictured her cousin Bimp's smug little smile, her mother's disappointed sigh, and she put the phone back down. By Saturday evening she'd convinced herself it didn't matter. One night. A few hours. Then it would be over and she'd never see Seojun Kang again. She wore red. Not because she wanted to impress anyone, she told herself that at least, but because red made her feel like armor. Like a woman who wasn't afraid of a room full of people waiting to laugh at her. He was already outside the hall when she arrived, leaning against a black car that looked like it belonged to someone far more important than a man she'd met in a lounge 2 nights ago. He straightened when he saw her, and for a moment neither of them said anything. His eyes moved over her slowly, and something about the way he looked at her made her forget, briefly, that this was fake. "You clean up well," he said. "You say that like you expected less." "I expected different," he said. "Not less." She didn't know what to do with that, so she said nothing and they walked toward the entrance together. Her heart was hammering and she hated that it had nothing to do with her family waiting inside. The moment they stepped into the hall, the noise dropped. Not completely, but enough that she felt it, that particular hush that happens when a room notices something it wasn't expecting. Heads turned. Whispers started immediately. She caught her cousin Bimp's eyes go wide, watched her nudge the woman next to her, watched the news of Amara's mystery man spread across the room like fire on dry grass. "Amara." Her mother's voice cut through the crowd, sharp with surprise and barely disguised panic. "You didn't tell me you were bringing someone." "I didn't think it mattered, Mummy," Amara said, forcing a smile. "This is Seojun." Her mother's eyes moved over him. The suit, the posture, the quiet danger radiating off him that even she seemed to register without understanding it, and something shifted in her expression. Approval maybe. Or fear disguised as approval. "Korean," her mother said slowly, like she was testing the word. "How interesting." "Very interesting," Seojun said, his hand settling at the small of Amara's back like it belonged there. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions, forced smiles, and the particular exhaustion of performing happiness for people who had spent years waiting for you to fail. Amara watched her relatives circle Seojun like he was a rare artifact, asking questions about his business, his family, his intentions, questions he answered with practiced ease, vague enough to reveal nothing, charming enough that nobody noticed how little he'd actually said. He was good at reading people. It's what made her a good designer, understanding what people wanted before they said it. And watching Seojun navigate her family, she realized something unsettling. This wasn't his first time doing this. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't improvising. He was controlling the entire room without anyone realizing they were being controlled. Who was this man? Then her ex-fiance's cousin, a loud woman named Kayamika who'd never liked her, raised her glass a little too high and a little too drunk. To Amara, Kayamaka announced loud enough for half the room to hear, finally proving she's not completely unlovable. Laughter rippled through the crowd, some uncomfortable, some cruel, all of it landing on Amara like small, precise cuts. She felt her face burn. 3 years of this exact humiliation, and here it was again, dressed up in a toast. She felt Seojun go still beside her. "Excuse me," he said quietly, and before Amara could stop him he stepped forward, took her face gently in his hands, tilted her chin up toward him and kissed her. Not a stage kiss. Not a performance for the crowd. It was slow. Deliberate. The kind of kiss that made the room disappear, that made her forget the 80 relatives watching, that made her forget her own name for 3 full seconds. His hand slid from her jaw to the back of her neck, and she felt herself lean into him without meaning to, without giving herself permission. When he pulled back, the room was dead silent. "Forgive me," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, his eyes never leaving Amara's face. "I couldn't listen to another person insult the woman I'm falling for." Somebody dropped a glass. Amara stared up at him, her lips still warm, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could feel it. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't supposed to feel like anything. But standing there, in front of everyone who had ever made her feel small, she felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Something that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with the way he'd just looked at her like she was worth defending. Across the room, near the entrance, a man in a gray suit lowered his phone slowly, having just captured the entire moment on camera. His expression wasn't shocked like everyone else's. It was recognition. He typed a message, attached the photo, and hit send before slipping quietly out of the hall. Somewhere across the city, that message would reach a man who had been hunting Seojun Kang for 6 months. And now for the first time he finally had a face to go with the woman Seojun would do anything to protect. Do you think Seojun's kiss was really just to shut the family up, or is he already falling for her? Let me know in the comments below. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that subscribe button and like this video. It really helps this channel grow. Now let's get back into the story because what happens next is going to change everything. The reunion ended a little after midnight, and Amara floated through the last hour of it in a haze she couldn't explain. Her family had shifted completely. The whispers that once carried pity now carried something closer to envy. Her mother kept touching Seojun's arm, laughing a little too loud at things that weren't that funny, already asking when they could properly meet his family. Bimp, the cousin who never missed a chance to remind Amara of her failures, spent the rest of the night avoiding eye contact altogether. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, Amara felt unsettled. Because the man standing beside her, playing the role of devoted boyfriend so effortlessly, felt less and less like a man she'd paid for one night, and more like someone she was terrified to stop touching. They left together, his hand resting naturally against her lower back as he walked her to her car. Neither of them spoke about the kiss. She didn't know how to bring it up without sounding foolish, and he didn't offer. "Thank you," she finally said, standing by her car door, the night air cool against her heated skin. "You didn't have to do all that. The kiss. The line about falling for me." "I know," he said simply. "Then why did you?" He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind his eyes. "Because your cousin needed to shut up," he said. "And because I wanted to." Before she could respond to that, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and Amara watched something change in his face instantly, the easy charm from the party disappearing, replaced by a stillness so sharp it made her breath catch. He read the message twice. His jaw tightened. "I have to go," he said. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," he said too quickly, already stepping back toward his car. "Get home safe, Amara." He was gone before she could ask anything else, his car pulling away into the night with a speed that felt like escape, not departure. She stood there for a long moment, the warmth of his hand still lingering on her back, and told herself it wasn't her business. He wasn't her business. This was supposed to be one night, and one night was over. She didn't know that 3 miles away, Seojun was sitting in the back of that car, staring at a photo on his phone that had already been forwarded through 4 different channels. A photo of him kissing Amara, now sitting in the hands of a man named Taesung Moon, the head of a rival syndicate that had spent the last 6 months trying to locate Seojun in West Africa. "Boss," his driver said carefully, watching him in the rearview mirror. "Moon's people have her name already. Her address. Her family. Seojun said nothing for a long time, his eyes fixed on the photo. On the way Amara looked in that frozen moment, her eyes closed, her hand curled slightly against his chest like she trusted him without knowing anything about him. She was never supposed to be seen, he said quietly, more to himself than to his driver. What do you want to do? He didn't answer right away. 6 months of hiding, 6 months of careful, invisible movement through Lagos while he negotiated a deal that would end a war before it started. And one reckless decision at a stranger's family reunion had undone all of it in a single photograph. He should have walked away from her the moment she sat down at his table. He'd known it then. He'd felt the danger of it even as he agreed to her ridiculous proposal, some old stubborn part of him whispering that a woman like that, warm and sharp and unaware of the darkness sitting across from her, deserved to stay far away from his world. He hadn't listened. And now Tae-sung-moon knew exactly where to find the one person Seojun couldn't afford to lose. Put a car on her street tonight, he said finally. Quietly. She's not to know. And the deal with the Adewale family? If Moon knows you're in Lagos. The deal waits, Seojun said, his voice suddenly cold, final. She doesn't. Back at her apartment, Amara sat on her bed still in her red dress, staring at her phone, scrolling through nothing in particular, trying to talk herself out of the strange ache sitting in her chest. She told herself this was ridiculous. She'd known the man for 2 days. She didn't even know his last name until her mother asked for it at the party. This wasn't real. It was a business arrangement that got a little too convincing. But then why did her lips still feel warm? Why did she keep replaying the way he said, "I wanted to," like it cost him something to admit it? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Lock your doors tonight. Don't ask why. Please." She stared at the message, her stomach twisting into something between fear and confusion. She typed back immediately. "Who is this?" The reply came fast. "Seojun. Just trust me. I'll explain everything soon." Amara sat frozen on her bed, the phone glowing in her hands, a chill crawling slowly up her spine. Whatever this man was involved in, it was bigger than a lonely investor hiding in a nightclub lounge. And whatever it was, it had just followed her home. What kind of man asks you to lock your doors without explaining why? And why does some part of her still trust him completely? Tell me what you think is really going on with Seojun in the comments. And if this story has you hooked already, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next, because things are about to get a lot more dangerous. She didn't sleep that night. Amara lay awake with every light in her apartment on, her phone clutched in her hand, replaying his text over and over. "Lock your doors. Don't ask why." She'd locked them twice, checked the windows 3 times, and still felt like something was crouched right outside her peace of mind, waiting. By morning, exhaustion had turned her fear into frustration. She called him. He picked up on the first ring. "Amara. You don't get to send me a text like that and disappear," she said, her voice shaking with more emotion than she intended. "Who are you? Actually tell me. Not the version you gave my mother." There was a long pause on the line. She could hear him breathing, could hear the weight of a decision being made on the other end. "Meet me," he finally said. "Not on the phone. I'll send you an address." He almost said no. Every instinct told her to block his number, delete the photos from that night, pretend the whole reckless arrangement never happened. But some other part of her, the part that had felt safer standing beside him in a room full of people who despised her than she had in 3 years alone, wouldn't let her do it. She met him 2 hours later at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city, far from anywhere her family might see them. He was already there when she arrived, sitting with his back to the wall, facing the door, his eyes scanning the room the moment she walked in. She noticed it immediately, the way he watched everything, the way his posture never fully relaxed. "Talk," she said, sitting across from him, arms folded. So he did. Quietly, carefully, he told her the truth. Not all of it. She'd learn later that some pieces of Seojun Kang's life were too dangerous for anyone to know completely, but enough. He told her about his family's business, one that operated far outside the boundaries of anything legal, spanning ports and cities across 2 continents. He told her about the war brewing with a rival organization run by a man named Tae-sung-moon, a war Seojun had been trying to end quietly through a deal in Lagos, hidden from view. And he told her about the photograph. The kiss. How it had already reached Moon's people, how her name and face were now attached to Seojun's in a world that didn't forgive weakness or sentiment. Amara sat frozen through all of it, her coffee going cold in front of her, her mind trying to process the fact that the man who'd kissed her in front of her entire family was not a businessman playing pretend. He was the heir to a criminal empire, and she had just been dragged into the middle of a war she knew nothing about. "So what happens now?" she asked, her voice quieter than she expected. "To me. Nothing," Seojun said firmly. "Because I'm not going to let anything happen to you. You don't get to decide that alone," she snapped, fear making her sharper than she meant to be. "This is my life, Seojun. My family. You can't just—" "I already put protection on your street," he interrupted. "Your apartment. Your studio. I'll increase it. Moon won't touch you. I promise you that." "You promise," she repeated bitterly. "Like your promises mean something to a man like that." Something flickered across his face. Hurt, maybe, or frustration at his own helplessness. A feeling she suspected he wasn't used to. He reached across the table and to her own surprise she didn't pull away when his hand covered hers. "I know I have no right to ask you to trust me," he said, his voice low. "I know none of this is fair to you. You hired a stranger for one night to make your family stop talking, and instead I dragged you into something you never should have been part of. I should have said no to you at that lounge. I should have walked away the second you sat down. Why didn't you?" He looked at her for a long moment, something raw and unguarded breaking through the careful control he wore like armor. "Because for the first time in years," he said quietly, "someone looked at me and didn't see the empire. She just saw a man in a suit drinking alone and decided to talk to him anyway. I wasn't ready to let that go after one conversation." Amara's chest tightened, the anger in her softening despite every warning bell going off in her mind. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to feel anything real for a man she'd known for 4 days. A man whose world came with enemies and danger and photographs that could get her killed. But sitting there, his hand still covering hers, she realized with a quiet, terrifying clarity that it was already too late. Her phone buzzed suddenly on the table between them. A message from an unknown number, this time with no words, just a photo. A photo of her mother's house. Taken that morning. Amara's blood went cold. Seojun grabbed the phone before she could react, his expression hardening instantly into something she hadn't seen from him before. Not the charming stranger from the lounge, not the tender man who'd just bared his heart to her. This was the other side of him. The side that ran an empire. The side that made grown men afraid. "Get your things," he said, standing abruptly, already dialing someone on his own phone. "We're leaving. Now." "Seojun, what?" "Moon just told us he knows where your mother lives," he said, his voice deadly calm in a way that terrified her more than shouting would have. "That's not a threat, Amara. That's a declaration of war. Do you think Seojun can really protect Amara and her family from a man like Moon, or has this gone too far already? Let me know what you're feeling right now in the comments. I want to know if you're as nervous as I am. We're getting close to the end of this story and it's about to get intense. If you haven't already, subscribe now so you don't miss it, and let's finish this together." Everything moved fast after that. Seojun's men arrived at Amara's mother's house within the hour, quiet, efficient, careful not to alarm the family with more than a few unfamiliar faces added to the compound's security. Her mother assumed it was simply Seojun being a generous, attentive suitor. Amara didn't correct her. She didn't have the strength to explain that her family was being guarded because of a war that started with a kiss at a reunion. For 2 days, Amara stayed close to Seojun, moving between safe locations he controlled, watching him transform in front of her. Calm and tender in private moments, cold and commanding on every phone call that came through about Moon's movements. She should have been terrified. Some part of her was. But a larger part of her had stopped being able to separate her fear from the way her heart reacted every time he walked into a room. On the 3rd night, sitting together on the balcony of a house she didn't ask the location of, Seojun finally told her the rest. "Moon isn't just after me because of territory," he said quietly, staring out at the city lights. "Years ago my father made a decision that cost his family everything. A betrayal disguised as a business deal. Moon has spent his whole life waiting to return the favor. The photo of us wasn't the reason for this war, Amara. It was just the excuse he'd been waiting for. So none of this is really about me," she said slowly. "No," Seojun admitted. "But it will end because of you." She turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" "I called a meeting," he said. "Tomorrow. Moon, myself, both are people in neutral territory. I'm going to end this. The debt, the grudge, all of it, permanently. No more looking over shoulders. No more photographs turning into wars. That sounds dangerous. It is, he said simply, no attempt to soften it for her. But it's the only way you and your family stop being targets. She reached for his hand without thinking, lacing her fingers through his. And if it goes wrong? He turned to face her fully, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it, all the armor stripped away. Then at least you'll know, he said, that for the first time in my life I fought for something that had nothing to do with power. I fought for you. The meeting the next day took place in an empty warehouse near the port, the kind of place built for exactly this sort of standoff. Amara wasn't there, Seojun had insisted, and for once she hadn't argued, but she sat in a car 3 streets away, her heart in her throat, waiting for a phone call that felt like it took 100 years to come. When it finally did, it wasn't Seojun's voice. It was his driver's, breathless, rushed. It's done, he said. Moon backed down. Mr. Kang made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Full control of the shipping routes he originally wanted, in exchange for permanently ending the blood feud. No more war. No more threats to your family. Amara sat in stunned silence, relief crashing over her so hard she nearly cried right there in the back seat. Is Seojun all right? She asked quickly. There was a pause, the kind that made her stomach drop. He wants to see you, the driver finally said. He's waiting at the harbor. She found him standing alone at the edge of the water, his jacket gone, sleeves rolled up, staring out at the horizon like a man who had just put down a weight he'd been carrying his entire adult life. He turned when he heard her approaching, and the look on his face, relief, exhaustion, something achingly soft underneath it all, told her everything the driver hadn't. It's really over? She asked. It's over, he confirmed. Moon gets his routes. I get my piece. And you, he said, stepping closer, his hand reaching up to cradle her face the same way it had that first night. Get to go back to your normal life. No more danger. No more men watching your mother's house. She should have felt relieved by that. Instead, something in her chest ached at the thought of it, of going back to normal, of this ending here, of him walking away now that the danger that brought them together no longer existed. And us? She asked quietly, hating how vulnerable the question made her feel. Seojun studied her for a long moment, his thumb tracing gently along her cheekbone. That depends, he said, on whether you still want a fake boyfriend, or whether you're ready for a real one. Her breath caught. Seojun. I know what I am, he said, cutting her off gently. I know what world I come from, and I know I have no right to ask you to be part of it. But I've spent 4 days falling for a woman who walked up to a stranger in a lounge because she was tired of being made small by people who didn't deserve her. I'm not walking away from that because it's convenient. Amara felt tears gathering in her eyes, not from fear this time, but from something warmer, something she hadn't let herself feel in years. That first kiss, she whispered, wasn't fake to me either. He smiled. A real one, unguarded, the kind she suspected very few people had ever seen from him. And closed the distance between them, kissing her slowly under the harbor lights. No audience this time, no family watching, no cameras waiting to turn the moment into a weapon. Just the two of them, and a beginning neither of them had expected but both of them somehow had been waiting for. 3 months later, Amara's family reunion happened again. Smaller this time, quieter, but with one very notable difference. Seojun stood beside her the entire evening, no longer a stranger playing a role, but a man who had chosen her with his eyes wide open. Her mother didn't ask when the wedding was. She simply watched her daughter laugh, really laugh for the first time in years, and decided that was enough of an answer. Sometimes the love that saves us doesn't arrive quietly. Sometimes it walks in through the front door, uninvited and undeniable, and rewrites everything we thought we knew about being alone. Amara didn't find safety by avoiding danger. She found it in the middle of it, standing beside a man the world called dangerous, who never once made her feel anything but seen. Do you believe love found in the middle of chaos can really last? Or was Amara taking a risk she got lucky with? Would you have trusted Seojun the way she did, or would fear have won? Tell me honestly in the comments. I want to know what you would have done. If this story moved you, make sure you're subscribed for more Afro meets Soul stories, hit that like button, and share this with someone who needs a little romance in their day. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I'll see you in the next story.